And welcome back to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. We're talking this hour with our guest author, Peter Jennings, and we also have Kai Cole sticking around in studio helping out today.
Why,
with
hello.
our interview. Oops. Just trying to get here on the Facebook live stream. There we go. So, Peter, you wrote this book, why being happy matters.
Right.
Why did you choose the topic of happiness just to begin with?
Well, you know what? It chose me, Sam. I was talking to a guy by the name of Rick, and Rick is a very happy gentleman, but let me take 20 seconds and give you his background. He was born as a child of an alcoholic mother. His mother was a bad drunk. This created all sorts of family arguments between his mom and dad in the family, so he did not grow up in a happy, calm household. Pardon me, his mother eventually died of breast cancer. His sister died of breast cancer. Rick married his university sweetheart. They had two wonderful children, and she got ovarian cancer and died. Rick knew he had to do something to get over all this sadness, so he contacted his best friend Mike. They were both motorcycle guys, and he said, "Come on, let's go off on maybe about a month motorcycle trip." And they made it down to, I believe, North Carolina, and within the first week, Rick came around the corner on his bike to find Mike lying dead in the middle of the street he had wiped out. Rick returned. He began consoling Diane, who was Mike's widow, and strangely enough, the two of them started developing a relationship. But the fates were not done with Rick. Diane got cancer and died. Now, Sam, you're probably sitting there saying, this guy's happy? Well, yeah.
No, I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't ever want to meet this guy.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Sam, if you met him, you'd be delighted to do so. Because listen to what he told me. He said, Peter, there is a positive side to everything. You just have to accept that, or life can get you down. Yeah. Seems to me that when things go wrong, human nature gets some folks asking, what did I do to make this disaster happen? Me, I say, what did I do to get this far and achieve so much? How can I now move ahead? And that's his attitude, and he's able to, I guess, park things that he can't deal with and try and focus on the happiness aspect. He also, by the way, Sam, he told me there's a quote from the famous legendary coach Vince Lombardi, who after his team had lost the game said, we lost, we're only temporarily behind. And Rick says that probably did a pretty good job of summing up who I am and my approach to life and finding happiness. If it's not always, I'm confident it's just around the corner.
Wow, that's amazing. You know, it kind of reminds me a little bit of a story I heard from Tony Robbins, and I forget the name of the gentleman he was talking about. It was a gentleman who was a politician, and he was in a plane crash, and his body got horribly burned, and he was in the hospital, and he was joking around with his friend. You see that beautiful nurse over there? By the end of the week, I'm going to have her go out on a date with me, and he did, and they ended up getting married, and then he ended up becoming, I think, a governor, and he ran on the platform like, I'm not just another pretty face. And this guy, I think also he had a motorcycle accident. I mean, he had like all these horrible things happen to him, but he never let those things dictate how he felt about life.
That's right. Yeah, well, and you mentioned Tony Robbins. Actually, one of the guys that I interviewed for Why Being Happy Matters is John Robbins. John, as you may know, is the guy who was being readied by his father to take over the $1 billion Baskin Robbins enterprise. And John turned his back on it. He said, I can't do this. I can't run a business that puts food into people's stomachs. It's not good for them. And he broke with his father. He turned his back on this $1 billion enterprise. And yet he is one of the happiest people I've ever met. He lives with his family in Santa Cruz, California, and I have a delightful afternoon talking with him. And by the way, Sam, listen to this. John, who blogs on the Huffington Post, he writes books, he does lectures, and even though it was not his aim to do so, he ended up starting to make some money. And so he called a friend of his in New York and said, I don't know anything about money. What should I do with this? And he said, John, relax. I will invest it for you in some very calm and safe investments. Unfortunately, this chap put all the money with somebody by the name of Bernie Madoff, currently a 150-year guest at the Butner Federal Penitentiary.
Yes.
And overnight, John Robbins was wiped out. And he told me, he said, Peter, if you'd told me then that money will buy you happiness, I'd have told you where to shove it, which at least proves he's realistic. And yet, he's still happy. He said, money doesn't buy happiness. I need enough money to put a roof over my head, and after that, there's no use to it. It will not buy you happiness.
Right.
Yeah.
That reminds me of a woman I once met at a meeting who had just come back from India. And she'd gone there. She was at some ashram on a spiritual retreat for a few weeks. And before she was coming back to the United States, she was staying over in, it might have been Bombay or Mumbai, at one of these, luxury hotels, waiting to, coming up, for the flight the next day. And she was out on the veranda looking over the neighborhood. And there it's, everything's so close together. The slum is right across the street from a 5-star resort. And she's looking and she's like, oh, those poor people, they're so poor. If there was only something more I could do for them. And then she stopped herself, and then she really looked closely at the scene, and she said, you know what I felt? I felt shame on me for thinking I need to change their lives, as she looked down and she saw 2 grandparents holding each other's hands, the kids playing in the dirt with a little ball or bottle or something, and the happiness that she saw around us, and the parents watching the kids play, that she saw more happiness in this scene from a slum in India than she sees in the United States wherever she goes. And she thought, shame on me for thinking I need to fix this. There is so much for us to learn here, that we have everything and we're not happy.
Sam, you're absolutely right. And in fact, one of the people that I interviewed for Why Being Happy Matters, is Rocco Bellic, who's in California. He's an Academy Award nominated director, and he's done a marvelous film called Happy. And in fact, your listeners ought to get it. It's a documentary. It's just about an hour long, but it starts with a scene exactly as you just discussed. It's in a terrible slum in India, and you would think, well, it's abject poverty. These people must just be, horrendously sad, etc. And yet they are incredibly happy. And the reason is they have a community around them, and they don't need more than what their community provides them. And it's really quite revolutionary.
Yeah, it's really something. And community, that's something we talk about here quite a lot on the station.
I have a wonderful question for you, if you don't mind, Peter.
Sure, Kai.
I'm the resident tribe architect here at at the studio, but there's so many of us, and we all work to serve the people that are in our tribes. And I'm wondering, how can we program happiness into our lives and into the lives of our tribe? There's so many things that we have combating us and combating that happiness every day. Do you have like a go-to question that we could ask ourselves, or just a bit of a reminder that you would present to everyone to help us keep that in mind?
Yeah, absolutely, Kai. You and Sam, before we went on, you were talking about part of the process being acceptance. And I think that's really important, because I think people can integrate happiness into their lives. I mean, right now, the world in which we live, no matter where you live, is dealing with increased levels of stress and anxiety. And I mean, whether it's, you're worried about what President Trump is up to, or whether you're worried about what's going to happen in Europe and the Brexit situation, or the war in Syria and immigrants, et cetera, or just getting closer to home, worried about making the mortgage payment, or keeping the kids in school, or keeping your job. about, we're dealing with tremendous levels of anxiety and stress, and I believe that happiness is an antidote to that. But as you said, part of the process is acceptance. You have to say, okay, I'm not as happy as I should be. What am I going to do to change that? And a lot of it is attitude. You know, you can choose optimism and positive thinking. You can choose to have gratitude and thankfulness in your life. Or you can just choose to go the other way. Hey, let's just amass as much stuff as we can and buy this and buy that. Or you can say, I don't need all that stuff. What I really need is happiness. In the book, I have a number of what I call happiness breakthroughs, and at the end of the book, I list one thing that I learned from each of the 37 people that I interviewed. And I want the book to be both inspirational but also be a resource, because I believe people can read the book and say, hey, I can learn to maybe love people, not things, a little bit more in my life. And that's going to make me happier. So I think there are things you can do.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, that sounds great, Peter. It sounds like what you're talking about is really what we decide to focus on, right? Like if we focus on the things we have to be grateful for, the things we have to be happy about, like that helps us to keep from like feeling depressed about, you know, all of these gigantic things going on in the world that we really can't do anything about per se, but just like make us feel down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And I mean, the other thing is, you know, that people need to understand when I say happiness can be an antidote. I interviewed 7 PhDs as part of my book from around the world, and these are people who are doing serious studying on positive psychology, which is the sort of the fancy way of talking about happiness. But what I learned from them is that happiness can improve your outlook, add value to your day, and enhance your peace of mind. And very specifically, and I won't go through the whole list, but let me just give you a few ideas, because their clinical studies have proved, beyond the shadow of a doubt, people who are happy earn more money, make better decisions, perform at a higher level, enjoy greater levels of trust, negotiate better, and have more self-confidence and higher quality relationships. Now, what's not to like about that?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. That's a wonderful place for us to go out to our next break. But before we go out, just a quick shout out. We got tons of people on the Facebook live stream watching us. Dr. Laura Tirado, my dentist. I love her dearly. She is amazing. Alec Vasa, Natividad. Oh, my dear friend out in Germany. I hope you're doing well, Natividad. I haven't seen you in ages. GP, welcome. Nancy, thank you for tuning in. And Willie Rosario, welcome. Thank you guys all for tuning in. And I could just see on the board real quick, we got people listening in on the radio station from Japan, some fellow Canucks, UK, Germany, United States. What's that one about? Qatar. All right. I haven't seen Qatar for a while. Welcome all to the Conscious Consultant Hour. We're talking this hour with Peter Jennings, author of the book, Why Being Happy Matters. And we will be right back after these messages.